Welcome to this week's episode of Let's Chat with Derick. Excited to chat with our next guest because he has been doing incredible work. I'm not sure many of us know anybody across the country who has been a bigger advocate for small business as we go through these unprecedented times. I'm joined by Michael Wood. He is the owner of Ottawa Special Events. He's an Algonquin professor, and he's also a small business advocate. Probably not something Mike saw himself being going back about 11 months ago. But Mike, this is unprecedented times. And let's first of all talk about, the effect that this has had on your business, just to give some people some background on your business, the type of business that you have, and how it's affected you and your team.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to see you again, Derek. It's good to have you doing the show here, man. I love it. I own Ottawa Special Events with Peter Gilroy, who you know, and we provided event rentals, so equipment rentals for the largest events in Ottawa. So whether it was stages, sound, lighting, tents, tables, chairs, pipe and drape for trade shows, weddings, whatever the case was, any public gathering, we were generally there. You know, we did Capital Pride and Glow Fair, and the launch of the LRT, and so it's really back in March. Unfortunately, we had to lay off our entire staff. We were coming out of our slow season, so we only, I say only, but we had 22 people that we had to lay off. Over the summertime, we normally would employ 50 to 60 people full time, and it would be a constant barrage of trucks coming through. And I think probably around the time that we did Operation Support Local together at the shop, we probably couldn't have done it there because it was like just a constant sound of trucks backing up. And from March to today, we haven't been able to hire anybody back, and it's almost like the warehouse is in this time warp where it's frozen in time as if it was the day we left. It's pretty sad situation over there.
Well, and Mike, many people deal with these kinds of situations in different ways, right? And they have the energy to do one thing or another. You decided to put your energy into becoming a small business advocate. So take me back to how that decision was made in the first place.
Sure. So Keith Egley, the city councilor, we had some shows in mid March that were lined up at the Sportsplex and city buildings. And as I say, we're coming out of our slow season, and these were some larger shows, and we were working on the Tulip Festival. And so I called Keith and I said, I think the city's going to shut down. When people started talking about, what was potentially coming, I said, I think the city's going to shut down, if not the entire country. And I said, what should I don't even know what I should do at this point. And he
Yeah.
said to me, you have to start calling your MPs and MPPs, trying to figure out something, what's this going to look like. And I happened to think to myself at that very moment, Derek, oh my God, I'll become my father. Because my father would always call me and he says, you know, I've sent another letter to the prime minister. I've let him know what I think. And I'm like, oh man, I'm like, I'm 44 now. You and I probably met when I was like 18 or 20 for the first time. I'm now 44.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, I'm like, oh man, I'm becoming my dad. So I went in that night to Algonquin to get some marking done, and I was like, you know what? I will start. I'll make a quick phone call while I'm walking in. So I called Catherine McKenna's office, and I kind of laid it out. I said, look, my name's Mike Wood in Ottawa Special Events, and within an hour, Minister McKenna had agreed to meet with me, which I thought was pretty cool because at the time I kind of viewed her as number four in Canada, right? You had Justin Trudeau, Bill Morneau at the time, Chrystia Freeland, and Catherine McKenna, and so
Yeah.
she agreed to meet with me over Zoom. And then I said, okay, well, I'll try someone else. So I tried Mona Fortier, and then Minister Fortier agreed to meet with me. And then I realized I had become my father, and then I just continued forth from there. So,
Well, it's interesting, Mike, because I think a lot of people have probably reached out to these people, right? Because they're concerned, like you were as a business person. But it seems like you've had a greater influence than perhaps some others. Any reason you think behind that?
it's a good question. I get that a lot. You're like, how do you get these people to even call you back? And I think it's
Yeah.
I think I've done it the way I've always tried to do things, kindness, professional. I've never pointed a finger. I've asked for help, and I think just as people, inherently, we want to help others. And I've kind of laid it out with my situation. And then I've been fortunate. I met up with Mark Koleski from Ecobia, which is the Ottawa Coalition of Business Improvement Areas. He represents, as the chair, 6,200 plus businesses in the city. So, the voice got stronger as we were going along. And what I did, Derek, was I felt it would be irresponsible if I didn't. If I was going to do this for myself, I had to bring others along. So I started, as opposed to moving from, hey, this is Mike Wood and my one business, I asked them to do virtual roundtables with all these other small business owners. So it wasn't just me coming to the table. When I did, I was asked to testify before the House of Commons in June, by Pierre Poilievre's office, which I did, and I met other members of parliament there, Wayne Easter, who's the chair of the finance committee. So when I asked his office if MP Easter would join us, I had 100 other small businesses on that call. And so I moderated it and I let everybody ask their own questions. So I think I was successful because it just wasn't me. I had a whole army behind me saying, please help us. And I think that's what led to a stronger response.
And Mike, did you yourself and those other small businesses that came along with you and had the opportunity to speak to people that can, make a difference and make changes? Did you feel like you were heard?
Absolutely. It's just getting back to the chair of the finance committee, Wayne Easter. Uh, the rent program, the initial rent program was going to come to an end July 1st. And I said to him at the end, I said, Mr. Easter, I said, it's kind of ironic that on Canada Day, the rent program's going to come to an end. All these businesses could potentially go under, and we need an extension. Like, we can't. I felt like one of my college students, please, sir, give me an extension. So,
Yeah, exactly.
and it's true, it happened. So, and so I was asking for the extension. Then I think it was June 30th, like last second, the extension came through. So I think that played a role. And I also meet with the province regularly. And from October to when they shut down Queens Park, I was probably mentioned by name 7 times in question period. And one of
Wow.
those moments, the associate minister for small business stood up in Queens Park and he said it was through meetings with Mike Wood and others, who I assume is the people that were on the call with me, that the province got involved in the rent program. So,
Okay.
when we go to these meetings, it's not a matter of saying this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. I start with, here's the challenge and here's my recommendation. Take it or leave it. And I think there's
Right.
been moments where they actually took it and we went from there. So,
So, what other changes have you seen due to your involvement and the involvement of other small businesses that you've that you've gotten on board to not even on board, but gotten involved in speaking to people that, as I said, can make change?
sure. So, there's a couple things that stand out. When I first met with Catherine McKenna, the wage subsidy, which we all know about, was at 10% in Canada, while in Europe it was at 75%. So
Yeah.
after that meeting, not that long after that meeting, it became 75%. And I just want, kind of be clear that I think I'm one of some voices. And, I'm not the only one that's doing this. So I'm not taking full responsibility
No,
for
of course.
being
Yeah.
this influencer of change. But I think I was an additional voice to the cause. And then, some of the other things too that I feel, well, I know that I was involved in. So back in July, the province came to me and they said, we'd like you to testify before what they call SCOFIA, which is a standing committee on finance and economic affairs. Excuse me. So um, when they asked me to do this, and Derek, you know me, I've got this rock and roll background, and I never thought in a million years I'd be testifying before Queens Park and
No
the
kidding.
House of Commons.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I asked them, I said, I've got all these other small businesses that support me, I support them. Can they testify? So in August, I brought 19 small business owners from Ottawa before Scofia. Now, it would have been the only thing I'd be like, it would have been so cool was to be there. It was all over Zoom, and it was a 2 week process. I think they had 200 businesses testify, and 19 of them were I brought forward, and they were accepted. And so there's lots of people that probably that testified. Jared Goldsmith from
Yeah.
ESAX was one of
Yeah.
them, and Carla Briones, who owns Global Pet, she testified. So sort of the list goes on as to who appeared before this committee. And so I think outside of influencing change, I think I've been able to have people's voices heard on a larger scale too.
Through those voices, Mike, what has been the biggest frustration for small businesses?
Well, I think, even that's a good question because I think there's been a lot. I'm trying to pick which
I
one we
know
want to talk about.
it's difficult to pick one for sure, and maybe there, maybe there are, the top five you can share with us, because there's obviously many frustrated. I think people forget too that not only are they losing business, but they've had added costs to their business as well, right, at the same
For sure.
time. Now they're buying, they're buying masks and sanitizer and PPE and this sort of thing, things that they, you know certainly didn't have on the books before the pandemic hit, and now they're losing money and spending more money.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I've said repeatedly is that small businesses they took the most amount of precaution because they had the most amount to lose. And so, that you're exactly right. So they spend all this money on PPE, they still get shut down. And then the province has a grant available to cover PPE up to $1,000, but you have to have your business can be only 2 to 9 staff. And if you think of any restaurant in the city, most restaurants have more than 9 people working there. If you
Yeah.
think of the servers, bartender, cooks, dishwashers, the list goes on and on, right? So I think that was tough. I know the province is trying to rework that program so that more people can qualify, but there's certain things that people may not realize. So loans that were taken out pre-COVID, just as an example, things were trucking along and so on. Small business owners have personal guarantees on those loans. So if their businesses fail, their houses are up as collateral, their assets are up as collateral, and they could easily lose their business, their house, everything they've worked for. The insurance business has been an interesting thing where costs have skyrocketed, absolutely
Yeah.
skyrocketed. So some people haven't been able to even afford insurance. There was a snow removal company. I'm not going to go through the numbers. I can't remember what it was, but their insurance went up over 100%. So it's been a tough go. There's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes in a business and with the pandemic that perhaps some are not aware of.
And have you seen some businesses, that you had been working with, or through word of mouth, in our community here in Ottawa, have you seen them close due to the pandemic? I mean, I know some of them, that there have been some that the media has covered, but there may be some, that people don't even realize, like how desperate is that situation that business have been forced to close.
That's a great question. So the Canadian Restaurant Association 2, 3 weeks ago put out a statement saying that since March, 10,000 restaurants across Canada have closed due to the pandemic, which is a staggering number. And then Stats Canada had said that only 42% of businesses across Canada felt that they could sustain a second shutdown. And, things, I think, I remember I was talking to Peter yesterday and I said, I was telling some people in May, I said, if we're all back by September, I'll be shocked. And then probably, the second day of May, I was like, okay, if we're all back by November, I'll be shocked. And it just keeps progressing and carrying on. And nobody really has the answer. And it's just this uncertainty, I think, that people are struggling with the most too.
So, Mike, what does the future of small business then look like right now? I mean, I mean, it's a fluid situation, obviously, but there are so many questions still.
Absolutely. And costs keep piling up, bills keep coming in, hydro keeps coming in, and water and heat, and the province for the lockdown in October had, extended some funds to cover that and so on. I think that we're still going to see a lot of unfortunate situations happen. I don't want to be negative. I hate coming on these things and being negative, but I have to be realistic that, small businesses are going to struggle for a long time. I've seen different things from associations saying it will take 2 years for businesses to recover, that they're going to be working for 2 years to try and, repay the debt, because that CEBA loan, the Canadian Emergency Benefit loan that came out for 40,000. It's a loan at the end of the day.
Right.
The regional relief fund, which we qualified for as well too, it's still a loan. We have to pay it back to the government. I think the government's going to, in order for business to survive, the federal government is going to have to come out and turn these loans into grants, like the province did. The province is offering 10 to 20,000, depending on how much you're down, as a grant and not a loan. So I think that, if the government, and I understand public health comes first, but if the government's going to shut down small business, then people need to be compensated. This is their livelihoods.
Yeah, I think there's always a lot of concentration and a lot of talk about, the deficit when it comes to, the national deficit, the provincial deficit, and so on. I think people are forgetting, when it comes to debt, the amount of debt that small business is going to find themselves in, because it is a loan and not a grant. And that debt is quite frankly, on a personal basis for communities and for individuals, that's more important to be thinking about than the national and provincial debt, Mike.
Well, there's that, absolutely, and then the question is, from the government standpoint, how are they going to get the money back? Who are they going to tax to get the money back? Now, to touch on your point quickly, it's incredibly valid, because the charities, that have relied on small business, the minor sports teams that have relied on donations to keep the league running or teams running, that all generally all comes from small business. I don't want to, I don't know if I should say this or not, but you never see the Walmart minor hockey team, Derek, skating down the ice. You always see this, small business hockey team skating down the ice. So,
Right.
there's more people that rely on small business. I know that, some of the major charities that, are trying to solve diseases and cure diseases are saying that they don't have the funds, because they can't put on their galas. They don't have those businesses that are donating like they used to, because it's just not feasible.
Yeah, and a big frustration, you mentioned big box stores right there by mentioning Walmart. I mean, I think a lot of frustration for small businesses, and I've talked to many, through Operation Support Local, and they see these big box stores open, and and on your social media I've seen it as well. Hundreds of people, if not thousands, are filtering into these big box stores. There's no policing involved once you get inside, right? I mean, if your mask is halfway down your face, no one's there. And of course, I understand they don't want confrontation, but still, the rules are the rules. You can't see the person, using the hand sanitizer when they walk in. Whereas a small business, they're there, right? You walk into a boutique, you walk into a small, store that sells, for instance, chocolate, right? Uh, they can see you as soon as you walk in the door, right? They can make sure you have your mask on, remind you to use the hand sanitizer, only allow so many people into the store at one time. So I think that's probably the greatest frustration for small businesses. We can actually do a better job than the big box store.
Absolutely, and it comes back to my point, is that small business has the most amount to lose, so they're going to take the most amount of precautions to protect the people as they're coming in. And as we find ourselves in the lockdowns and they get tighter and tighter, there's a lot of boredom shoppers, which I can almost appreciate. There's nothing
Yeah.
to do, so let's wander up to Walmart and see what's happening, and just get out of the house, because it's hard to be trapped inside your house 24/7. I know we're all doing it for the right reason, but as people, we're social. and we like getting out, we like doing things, and I think, especially during this one, we're going to see more boredom shoppers than we ever have.
My advice on how to continue to support small business during this time. Restaurants, I think, are sort of a no-brainer, right? We know we can do the takeout and delivery and so forth. But if you're not a restaurant and you're a small business, what can the community do to help support them?
And that's a great question. I have a friend that owns a party store, not rental, but hats and plates and costumes at Halloween
Yeah.
and so on. And she's all up in arms because one of the big grocery stores on Facebook had an ad saying, "We now have your non-essential essentials," and they were saying, "Come, Brett, come look at our aisle." And these ads are crazy. Like, they honestly, when she sent it over, she was losing her mind because one of this grocery store was saying, "Come and check out what we have in our party aisle," and I think that we just have to consider where we're buying things. And when you go, okay, well, I need X, Y, and Z. Where can I get this? Well, I can get this either here at this box store, or I can drive that extra 5 minutes and go support this person. These are people's families, and if you just consider that, you know, my kid's sports team has relied on this store over the years, or my neighbor's business, or whatever the case is, I think we just need to make better choices when we go to purchase something. And then on the flip side, for small business, the Ontario government does have a way if anybody's watching and they don't know, they will give you up to $2,500 to create an e-com site. But you know, small business that's operated this way for so long, they don't have the logistics. They don't have okay, so how do we do this? How do we ship this? How do we get this there? Such as another spot that's a relatively large e-com, Derek.
I may know which one you're thinking of. But it's
Yeah.
interesting that you mentioned that $2,500, Mike, because I know about it simply because I'm talking to people like you. But my guarantee is not enough small businesses know about it because the province or federal government, they haven't done a good enough job educating small businesses of what is available to them. And I think that's one thing that frustrates me a great deal, because talking to many small businesses, I mentioned some of the things that are available and they go, "Oh, I had no idea." Have you heard that yourself from small businesses? I didn't even know that was available to me.
Absolutely. When I appeared before the province in November at Queens Park, I was doing some math because they give you a 7-minute presentation, opening remarks, and then you answer the questions. I did the math on it, and just over, I think it's 5.1 or 5.3 of small businesses in Ontario had accessed the what they call the Main Street digital, or digital Main Street, to create an e-com site. So I agree with you. I don't think a ton of people know about all the things that are available. There was $400 or $450 off your hydro bill back in October through the Ontario Energy Board. And, it's one of those things. You're trying to run your business, you're trying to keep the lights on at home, you're trying to, keep your family operating. And it's almost impossible to stay up to date with the latest thing, especially
Yeah.
if it isn't amplified through the media.
Yeah, and I guarantee someone might be watching this right now, and when I mention that, they may say to themselves, "Well, it's up to the small business owners, that they have to understand that they have to educate themselves to find out what's out there." But as you just mentioned, everything else that's going on with their lives, right? They have kids that are now at home. And doing school online, for instance, they don't have the benefit of them going to school. They can't afford to, for a caregiver. It just goes on and on. They have this anxiety. People are suffering from mental illness going through all of this. So it's easy for people to criticize and say, well, maybe you should, take the time to find out what's available. But I think people lose focus of what's happening in people's lives and what's happening to their mental health during a time like this. So, Mike, when it comes to small business, I mean, what's next? What is the next step? What are you looking at? What, sort of what's your vision? What are you going to people that can, make change on different levels of government? What's your next step? What are you going to approach them about?
Sure. So and I'll answer the question. I'm not trying to dodge the question at all.
Yeah, no,
Um,
okay.
the one of the reasons I think I've been successful with having meetings is I'm also nonpartisan. So I don't
Right.
subscribe to a particular party. So moving forward, to answer your question now, I am meeting with Aaron O'Toole next week, and Pierre Poilievre as an example. So when we go to do this and we ask for things, I don't always go to the party in power. I try and have
Right.
voices of small businesses amplified by the other parties as well too. So provincially, I deal with the NDP quite a bit, and then federally, I'm dealing with the Conservatives, looking for the requests that we do have, and the requests coming up are going to be for insurance support, no fault bankruptcy, so that people don't lose their homes if they do go bankrupt. It's a very sad situation. We can't compound it by having them lose everything at the same time. HST remittances, with an HST remittance, you are personally liable as well too. So if the business
Right.
does fold, any money that you owe the government in HST. So we're going to be looking for forgiveness on that. And, just looking for, as I said earlier, trying to convert some of these loans into grants federally. And then provincially, one of the things that, again, public health comes first. But what we find is that the province is listening to one industry, and that industry is healthcare, and it's incredibly important, and people need to survive this. The only thing is that I think is that the province needs to start hearing and get a more well-rounded view of where everybody's at. So education. I know a lot of people that are struggling with having their kids at home and trying to keep them on Zoom. My niece is 4 years old and she has to sit in front of a computer for 6 hours a day. That's a
Yeah.
tough situation on a young kid. So I would like to see part of the health board. To give you an idea, Ottawa Public Health and Dr. Etches asked me to meet. I am the furthest thing from a doctor, as you know, but they want to talk about the safe reopening. So I would like to see with the province that while the health board and the Ministry of Health is at the table, that education's at the table, small business is at the table. Small business is the largest employer in Canada. So I just like to see
Yeah.
more voices heard at the same time.
Terrific, Mike. We'll end it on that. Thanks so much for spending time with us. I really appreciate it, and keep up the great work. We really appreciate all the hard work you and many of the others that have stepped up to help small business and communities across the country.
Thank you, Derek, and yourself as well. I'm so glad to see you doing this show.
Thanks, pal.